The crash was not glorious. It was fire, metal shrieking, and the gut-punch realization that the shuttle was never going to fly again. Lieutenant Marcus Hale had been through drops before, but none that ended with him half buried in alien soil, lungs full of smoke, and silence pressing in like a coffin lid. He pulled himself free of the wreck, coughing black ash into the dawn air. His suit was cracked, his gear scattered, and every system that might have called home was fried. For a long minute, there was nothing. Just the broken frame of a man kneeling in the dirt, staring at the horizon of a world unmarked on any chart. Then came the footsteps. Not human ones. The ground shook first, a low percussion that rattled his ribs. He looked up, squinting through haze, and froze. They emerged like myths walking out of fog, women, each one a giant compared to him, their frames sculpted with muscle and grace. Twice his height, armed with spears that gleamed in the rising light. Their eyes were sharp, wary, predatory. Marcus did not reach for his ruined pistol. Even intact, it would have been a joke against this kind of power. He forced himself to stand straight, blood drying on his temple, and met their gaze. The lead warrior barked something guttural. Another laughed, low, booming, like boulders tumbling. They circled him, voices overlapping in a language he could not parse. One leaned close enough that he saw scars lacing her jaw, trophies of battles fought before his species had even known fire. Finally, one word carried through, human. He stiffened. They knew what he was. Which meant others had come here before, and likely not survived. The tallest among them stepped forward. Her presence silenced the others instantly. She was adorned with feathers and bones, her spear taller than the shuttle's hull. The Chieftainess, he guessed. Her eyes locked on him with an intensity that made his skin crawl. She spoke slowly, the words accented but understandable, shaped from some ancient trade tongue. You are small. Marcus's lips twitched. Compared to you, everyone is. A ripple of laughter passed through the warriors, though their faces quickly hardened again. The Chieftainess tilted her head, studying him like a hawk studies a mouse. You fall from the sky, trespass on sacred ground. The law is death. Spears shifted. A dozen razor points angled toward his chest. Marcus inhaled once, steady. Panic would serve him poorly. He raised his chin. Then why haven't you killed me yet? The question hung in the air. For a heartbeat, even the wind seemed to wait. The Chieftainess's mouth curved, not into a smile, but something darker. Because, she said at last, the small are sometimes clever. We would see if this is true. She gestured, and the circle widened. The warriors murmured, half amused, half hungry for sport. Marcus realized he was no prisoner. They saw him as entertainment, a test, maybe even a warning to each other. The Chieftainess's voice rang out, firm enough to rattle the earth. Prove the strength of your kind. Show us you are more than fragile bone and thin blood. Fail, and you will die here, forgotten. Marcus's throat was dry, but his mind was clear. He had been underestimated his entire life, by superiors, by rivals, by enemies who thought size and power were the only measures of worth. And now, stranded on a world of giants, he faced the ultimate test of that truth. He took one step forward, boots sinking into alien soil, and met her gaze without flinching. Then give me the chance. The warriors erupted in thunderous approval, pounding spear hafts against the ground until the air shook. The Chieftainess raised her weapon, silencing them once more, and nodded. So be it, little human. You will be given a trial. Survive, and you may yet earn a place among the living. The verdict was spoken. His fate was sealed. Alone, weaponless, and dwarfed by titans, Marcus Hale would have to prove that humanity was not made to kneel. They stripped him of what little remained. The cracked visor, the half-fried datapad, even the survival knife at his hip, gone. His only gift from the giants was a single wooden shaft, its tip crudely sharpened. A toy in their hands, but in his, it would have to become a weapon. The Chieftainess stood tall above him as the tribe gathered around the boundary of their village. Behind her rose towering huts carved from the trunks of trees thicker than any skyscraper column back home. Beyond that, the forest. Dark, unbroken, breathing with unseen things. She declared the terms in a voice that carried like thunder. One night in the jungle. Return at dawn with proof of your kill, or not at all." The women roared their approval. Marcus caught the glint of cruel amusement in some eyes, but in others, curiosity. They wanted to see how the little outsider would fall. He adjusted his grip on the spear and stepped into the shadows of the trees. The forest swallowed him whole. The air was damp, heavy with rot and the musk of predators. Every step cracked branches thicker than his arm. The canopy let in little moonlight, so he moved by instinct and the faint glow of phosphorescent fungi that painted the underbrush. It wasn't long before the first sound reached him. A low growl, not far, like stone grinding on stone. Something massive shifted in the dark. Marcus stilled. Running was pointless. Giants tested strength. Humans survived through wits. He crouched low, pulling strands of vine from a fallen log, working them into a crude snare. His father's voice echoed in memory. "If you can't outfight it, outthink it." The creature came closer. He caught its silhouette against the faint glow. 6 legs, plated hide, eyes glowing orange. A predator built to crush. It sniffed the air, hunting the smoke of his breath. Marcus laid the snare between 2 roots and smeared himself with the mud of a nearby pool. The stench masked his scent just enough. He waited, body trembling, until the beast lumbered forward. The snare snapped, pulling tight around its front legs. The monster roared, thrashing, snapping trees like twigs. Marcus did not cheer. He sprinted. He used its fury against it, weaving between trunks until it slammed its head against a boulder. That was his opening. He drove the spear upward into the beast's exposed eye. Once, twice, until the wood splintered in his hands. The creature howled and collapsed, its weight shaking the forest floor. He collapsed too, chest heaving, covered in blood both his and not his. It was not clean. It was not glorious. But it was enough. Hours crawled by. He dragged what proof he could, a claw the size of his forearm, ripped from the carcass. His muscles screamed, but he pressed on, following the faint glow of the village's torches. When he finally stumbled out of the jungle, dawn was breaking. The giants were already assembled, betting among themselves on whether his corpse would be found first. The chatter died when they saw him. Bloodied, limping, clothes in rags, but alive. He dropped the claw at the chieftainess's feet with a dull thud. A hush spread through the crowd. Then whispers. Then disbelief. Some warriors laughed nervously, shaking their heads. Others stared with something sharper than mockery, something close to respect. The chieftainess bent down, picking up the claw. It looked small in her hand, but the truth was plain. The human had killed a predator meant to end him. She studied him with an unreadable expression, her lips neither smiling nor frowning. "You did not flee. You did not beg. You killed." Marcus's voice was raw, but steady. "I survived. That's what we do." The crowd erupted. Some shouted his name already, others cursed him as a trickster. Spears banged against shields, voices clashed like storm winds. For the first time since he'd arrived, Marcus wasn't just prey to them, he was a question. The chieftainess raised her hand, silencing the chaos. She fixed him with eyes that burned like coals. "One night is not enough. To earn breath among us, you must face me." The air seemed to shatter around her words. Marcus felt the weight of it, heavier than the beast's claw he had dragged. The trial of fire had ended, but the true battle was only beginning. And this time, he would face not a monster, but a legend. The circle was drawn at dawn. Packed earth, cleared of debris, ringed by 100 towering figures. The village was awake, and every gaze bore down on Marcus like the weight of an executioner's blade. They had seen him survive the jungle, but survival was not enough. The chieftainess had demanded blood. She entered the ring with no armor, only a spear as tall as a tree trunk and scars that mapped her body like rivers of old wars. Her presence alone silenced the tribe. To them, she was more than leader, she was proof of strength incarnate. And now she would measure the small outsider with her own hands. Marcus stood opposite, armed with a short spear they had begrudgingly given him. He rolled his shoulders, forcing out the stiffness of the night before. He had one advantage: he wasn't expected to win. That meant they couldn't predict how he would fight. The Chieftainess's voice rang out across the circle. "Strike me down, and you may walk among us. Fail, and your bones will feed the earth." He exhaled. "No pressure then." The crowd roared with laughter at his defiance. But when the echo faded, only the beating of his own heart remained. The duel began with a thunderclap. She moved first, faster than her size should allow, her spear slicing through the air. Marcus dove aside, the weapon smashing into the ground where he had stood, spraying dirt like shrapnel. He scrambled up, jabbing low at her leg. She knocked the strike away effortlessly, the clash sending vibrations up his arm. He danced back, circling, forcing her to follow. Every instinct screamed at him, "Don't meet her strength head-on." That path ended with bones broken like twigs. Instead, he watched her. Every fighter has rhythm, even giants. The trick was finding it. She lunged again, sweeping in a wide arc. He ducked, rolled beneath her strike, and stabbed upward at her exposed side. She twisted, catching his spear between her hands, and with a single jerk tore it from his grasp. The crowd erupted, certain it was over. Marcus stumbled back, empty-handed, breathing ragged. The Chieftainess stalked forward, spear leveled at his chest. "Small," she said, almost pitying, "but brave." He smiled through bloodied lips. "You forgot clever." And then he moved. He dove for the ground, scooping up the broken shaft of wood from their earlier clash. Not a weapon, a distraction. He hurled it at her face. Instinctively, she swatted it aside, her guard shifting just enough. Marcus surged forward, closing the impossible distance. He ducked under her reach, slammed his shoulder into her thigh, and hooked his arm around the haft of her spear. Momentum was his only ally. He yanked, twisted, using her own size against her. The Chieftainess staggered half a step, small for her, but seismic for the crowd. Marcus pressed harder, feinting left, then tearing right. The spear wrenched loose from her grip. Gasps split the air. For the first time, their unshakable leader stood unarmed. Marcus planted the spear into the ground between them, chest heaving. He did not aim it at her. He did not strike the killing blow. He simply held her gaze, daring her to deny what had just happened. Silence pressed heavy. The Chieftainess studied him, breathing steady despite the duel. Then, slowly, she lowered her head, not in defeat, but in acknowledgment. "You fight with no strength," she said, voice carrying to every ear, "yet you take mine from me. You are not prey." The tribe shifted uneasily. Some shouted in protest, unwilling to accept their champion had been bested by a man so small. Others, eyes wide, looked at Marcus with something like awe. He spat blood into the dirt. "I didn't come here to kneel. I came here to live." The Chieftainess straightened, taller than the sky itself, and nodded once. "Then live you shall. The trial is ended." The crowd roared, torn between fury and admiration, but none could deny what they had seen. The human had not only survived, he had stolen victory from their greatest warrior without brute force. In that moment, Marcus was no longer just a trespasser. He had become a problem, a symbol, a spark of doubt in the order of their world. And sparks, given time, could burn forests to ash. The circle did not break at once. Even after the Chieftainess declared the trial ended, the tribe stood locked in a storm of voices. Some warriors shouted that the duel was a trick, that strength should never bow to weakness. Others pounded their spears against the earth, chanting in wild approval. The air trembled with conflict, as if the ground itself was deciding whether to split beneath Marcus's feet. He remained standing in the center, bloodied, bruised, one breath from collapse. But he would not kneel. He had not crossed fire and death just to be made spectacle. His silence was louder than their noise. Finally, the Chieftainess raised her arm. The uproar dwindled, unwilling but obedient. She stepped forward, picking up the spear he had planted in the ground between them. She turned it over in her hands, then pressed the haft into the soil at his feet. "This one," she said, voice like a rolling storm, "has taken my weapon. He has taken my measure. By our law, none may call him weak." A ripple moved through the gathered giants, shock, then disbelief. To admit another's worth was one thing. To admit the worth of one so small was near heresy. Marcus bent, gripping the spear, but instead of raising it in triumph, he let it rest against his shoulder. His eyes met hers, steady. Respect isn't given. It's earned. And I'll take it only if it's true. The words cut deeper than any blade. A hush fell. Warriors shifted, their towering frames uneasy. For the first time, the measure of strength itself seemed uncertain. That night, the fire pit blazed higher than ever. Meat roasted, drums thundered, and the village sang. But the celebration was fractured. Some feasted in Marcus's honor. Others watched him with narrowed eyes, muttering of curses and omens. The chieftainess sat apart, her gaze never leaving him. At last, when the embers burned low, she approached. "You changed something today," she said. "They do not know whether to fear you or follow you." Marcus stared into the flames. "I don't need them to follow me. I need them to understand me." Her laugh was low, roughened by battles long past. "You sound like a fool. Yet fools often build the future while the wise guard the past." She leaned close, her massive shadow falling over him. "Tell me, little human, if I offered you place among us, would you accept? You would live as one of my tribe, fed, defended, remembered." He looked up at her, weary but unbending. "And what would it cost me? My name, my people, to forget where I came from." The firelight caught her expression, and for a heartbeat she seemed almost human herself, tired, questioning, caught between pride and doubt. "No," she admitted. "Only the cost of being bound. Bound to us, to me, to this life. You would no longer be a man alone." Marcus thought of the jungle, of the beast's roar, of the way she had fallen back when he'd wrenched her weapon away. He thought of Earth, of humanity scattered across stars, of what it meant to stand small and still not bend. He shook his head. "Then I'd rather stand alone." The silence that followed was not angry, it was heavy. The chieftainess studied him as though he were the first puzzle she had not solved. Then, slowly, she straightened and raised her hand. "Hear me," she commanded, voice carrying over the sleeping and the restless alike. "This human is not ours to own. He is not our slave, nor our captive. He walks with his own fire. And that fire is not to be extinguished." The declaration rolled across the camp like thunder. Warriors stirred uneasily, but none dared defy her openly. Marcus, for the first time since the crash, felt the weight in his chest ease. He had not been made pet. He had not been made subject. He had carved out something rarer than safety, respect. When dawn touched the horizon again, Marcus stood at the edge of the village. His body still ached, but his spirit was steel. Behind him, the giants watched, not as wardens, not as executioners, but as witnesses. The chieftainess lifted her chin once, in silent salute. He returned the gesture. Then he turned toward the endless jungle, the broken shuttle beyond, and whatever fate lay waiting. The story would spread. That a man no taller than their children had defied the strongest of their kind, and lived. That size was not the only measure of power. And somewhere in the silence between heartbeats, Marcus smiled. In a world of giants, humanity had stood taller than anyone expected.